He still got us.
Well, I was acting.
Oh.
You're welcome for that master class lesson. Huh? Oh, okay.
All right. Well, the theme song's just about over now.
It is?
I don't know.
Cool. Korma, 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 korma.
What rhymes with effervescent? Don't answer that.
Okay. I was going to make up a word.
That was just a special little shout out to Topher.
Leffervescent.
Leffervescent. There you go, Topher. The age-old question is finally answered.
How about leper croissant? Is that close? When he says it, it sounds more like a rhyme. Leper croissant. Got to be careful.
So, hey.
Where did we go? Where do we go when we're not podcasting?
Do we even exist when we're not podcasting?
I know I don't. Well done.
What tables were you loading in? The 4th of July.
Already happened.
That's
yes.
Because it's now Sunday the 8th.
It sure is.
Oh.
World of tomorrow.
Boy. Wow.
Yeah. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good. Man, speaking of things that have already happened, so Andy Griffith died
Still alive?
As
as of,
this recording, he is not.
yes.
No. That's why he brought him up.
Yeah, I brought it up only because I saw it on my Yahoo news service, like when I was, well, this morning or this afternoon, whenever I
Right.
saw it. And but on the drive over here, they were playing that Drake song, Best I Ever Had. And there is a line in the song that references Andy Griffith.
Is there?
First, let me read the song to you, and then I will try to recreate what the DJ said after the song was over. Okay.
Go ahead.
So here's the sample of the line referencing Andy Griffith. They bring dinner to my room and ask me to initial. She call me the referee 'cause I be so official. My shirt ain't got no stripes, but I can make your kitty whistle like the Andy Griffith theme song. Kitty is not the word they use in the original song.
What?
Yeah. But then, so anyway, so that whole song played, and I was like, wow, I wonder if they're playing this. And then sure enough, the DJ comes on afterwards and is like, yeah, that song talks about Andy Griffith, who just died.
Period.
And that was it. Like there was no, and it wasn't like that song is even about Andy Griffith. It was just one little reference in there. But in the mind of this DJ,
It really summed up the man's career.
it did. No, it was not. It was, he's,
Second death he's dropped on me.
really? What was the other one? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be
I
that
was totally
messenger
gonna make a
for
joke
you.
and be like, oh, Andy Griffith, is he still alive?
I am not making that bingo card.
Thank you. It's best not to.
Can't put that much pressure on Adam.
Andy. No, he died. He died last year, didn't he? Okay.
That one's probably not our fault.
Yeah. I didn't have a chance to see him live anywhere, so I can't be blamed for that one.
You tend to kill him.
Well, I have this horrible fear because there have been several older like legends and celebrities that I've had the opportunity to go see. Like they were touring through a town I was living in at the moment, or you know, heavily discounted tickets came my way or something, and and not always, but occasionally have refused. And in those rare occasions when I have refused, that celebrity musician dies within the next month. Happened with Ray Charles, happened with a couple of others. And so I have this fear, this obsessive, completely unjustified, irrational fear that if some living musical legend or acting legend it comes my way and I do not seize that opportunity, they will be dead in a month.
It's your personal obligation.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm glad we stopped contemplating.
Aren't you? Yeah.
That you didn't
And
suddenly fail.
it could have been Regina Spektor. We
And
never know
Ron White.
exactly who I'm saving. Oh, or Ron White. Who knows?
Wow.
Yeah. They just learned something about me. Internet.
Well, I had a great afternoon before we get to business. I got to spend an hour living in the future. My niece lives in Scotland. She's 4. She's adorable. And we played on Skype for like an hour this afternoon, just making faces at each other and dancing and telling jokes back and forth. And it was a fantastic use of technology. I mean, she shared this fantastic joke with me that I would like to share with you, the podcasting public. Why did the shirt go to the doctor? To have his brains examined.
Ooh, that's surreal.
She told it better.
Oh.
But yeah, I had a great time, and it was like, I always remember going to Epcot young. There was this thing in Spaceship Earth, big golf ball ride. That was like because the whole ride was about human communication, and you go from the past to the present to the future, which was all of the original 80s Epcot rides were some element, past, present, and future, sponsored by whoever made that thing in real life. So AT&T always had Spaceship Earth about human communication, and towards the end, it was like a kid at home and a mom working in a Mars station, science station, and they were like video chatting, and the two dioramas were one animatronic kid on a bed talking to this full motion video projection, and then on the other diorama she was sort of a static animatronic sculpture, but the kid was fully videoed, and so it looked like they were chatting to each other across space. And I always just thought it was one of the cooler displays in the whole thing. That would be the future, that you could talk with anybody anywhere and be able to make eye contact. Because like on a telephone, I'm very uncomfortable because I can't look at the other person. I can't read the nonverbal communication.
Yeah, I've been told I'm terrible to have a phone conversation with. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I keep, pushing to have us podcast in person rather than
As
trying
much
to
as
do
possible,
it away
yeah.
from each other,
Yeah.
because being able to look at you both is easier to keep the conversation going.
Agreed.
Oh, I've gotta give props. I saw the movie Battleship at the Dollar Theater, and it was well worth my $2. It was really good. Like, not even just like, wow, for a movie based on a video game. It was a good action flick. I mean, I liked it.
That was Darkman in Battleship. That's what, yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. It frightened me, and so I kicked my microphone. Two Jeffs. Speaking of being on topic, I have an article.
Let's do it.
All right, I will. This is an article about an art installation that unfortunately closed about 2 weeks ago in New York. But I was really excited when I stumbled across it because it kind of tied into an article that I found a couple weeks ago, a science article that I've been was sharing with a couple of friends. In fact, I think I talked to you guys about it, a lot of people I work with at the Springer, because it was just really cool. I'll start by talking about that. There is a Dutch company. I know, said that for Jeff's reaction. There's a Dutch company called the Mars One Project, and it's funded by this guy named Bas Lansdorp. And their goal is to begin a Martian colony by 2023. And he has this whole plan in place as to how he think it's going to play out. Basically, he's going to start drafting. Drafting's not the right word. Recruiting
Recruiting.
people. There we go. He's going to start recruiting people now because the idea is it's going to take a decade of training to get this organized. Because the idea is, once they go there, they can't come back. So it's a one-way trip, and so you have to be prepared, I guess, both psychologically and physically to deal with the fact that you are going there to set up permanent residence on Mars.
So it's like the most exclusive dating. It's going to be a generation.
Yeah, it is.
It's like
It's interesting
you
because
might meet.
right, and but that's interesting because they were talking about that prospect in one of the articles on the Mars One project, and how they were saying how initially they have to agree, at least for the first couple of, I guess, groups that show up on the planet. They said absolutely no uh,
Shenanigans
shenanigans. I mean, shenanigans can be had, but you can't have a baby because they just wouldn't
aren't
have.
ready for that
Right,
step.
right.
Well, because, amongst other things, that would be a native Martian. Um,
Yeah, what kind of rights and
exactly. I
hmm.
mean, that opens an interesting door.
And which is one I want to come back to because that's kind of a question that I came up when I was thinking about this other article and how they tied together.
All right.
So this other article was about an artist named Tom Sachs, who his installation that just recently closed in New York at the Park Avenue Armory. It's called Space Program Mars. He had a installation back in 2007 called Program, which had a trip go to the moon, but it was small. It was a smaller undertaking, obviously, than going to Mars.
Well,
Um,
sure.
yeah, and but this one was a bit bigger, a bit more extensive, and they basically took over this um, gigantic room. It's at 50,000 square feet room, where they, I won't say recreated, but created a Martian landscape out of things like plywood, fiberglass. They said like the white and orange, like pedestrian barriers and stuff like that. They made a module that would have landed on
Uh-huh.
Mars. They built a rover where they like disassembled a car and had it exposed, and that was what you would use. There was also, like, as part of the experience, you could go in and just look at all the artifacts that they had kind of recreated out of
Yeah.
this stuff, or you could watch a series of orientation movies that his Tom Sacks's artist group had made, and then after you watched them, then you went into something called the indoctrination station, where people in white lab coats would test you over what you had seen in the video, and if you scored high enough, then you got to enter the lunar module thing. It was a more you got to be more involved and be considered part of the crew of this mission to Mars, as opposed
Interesting.
to people that could just walk through. But again, the way that they assembled all the artifacts came out of like a specific philosophy that the artist Tom Sachs has. Basically, how he was saying, um, uh, if you look at NASA's objects, said it's totally handmade, but all the traces have been polished away or integrated somehow. And he was saying how early on in his career, when he was trying to first branch out and sculpt and make these installations, he was trying really, really hard to cover all of those little mistakes, as it were. But he said the more and more he tried, number one, the more expensive it got to produce the work, and number two, he said really all it did was bring attention to those mistakes. So he said one day had this epiphany that it was really all those dents and scars and scrapes and like the hot glue drippings and scabs and scars that add to the madeness of the whole thing and
Yeah.
make it what it is.
Yeah. Unique rather than something that anybody could put together somehow.
Right. And and there's a philosophy there that he said it also kind of shows off maybe traces of the artist and the person that worked on it, as opposed to covering all those things up. So that whole philosophy kind of bears out the whole installation. uh, they had a quarantine unit that they created, which was a 1972 Winnebago, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
they gutted it and then sort of rebuilt it from the inside using empty like those propane torch
Yeah.
bottle things and coffee makers and things like that. And the very last day of the installation, all of the artists that had contributed to the project that work under Tom Sachs, they did an 11-hour mission to Mars. So that you basically started in the indoctrination station, and over the course of the day went through blast off and and the journey there, and then
Yeah.
you land there and have to take soil samples and all of those things that would be part of the mission to Mars. Um, so yeah, so that's a cool little thing that I came across.
That's that's very cool. I like the idea of interactive theater, of creating an environment and a story that the audience is both spectator to and participant in. And I love this idea that, okay, let's let's face it, we cannot build a space shuttle for these people to walk through. We're going to build this found object sculptural representation of a space shuttle that will tell the story more accurately because it is accessible than this cut off perfected version. And I just recently learned the Japanese term wabi sabi, which is the little imperfections that make art truly unique and powerful and interesting. Yes.
Same letters, different order.
um, but the other thing I really like about this idea is I was just reading an article about the man who offered the X Prize for the commercial orbital ship. Um, that he's really adamant that we're past the point where governments and nonprofits are going to fund additional space exploration until there's some value to the government or nonprofit. And therefore, it's up to commercial ventures to create that exploration.
Yeah, yeah. The SpaceX program
Mm-hmm.
was referenced a lot in conjunction with this installation, specifically because the man that runs it, he said he was less interested in, say, actually getting to the moon and starting a lunar colony or going to Mars, as to just proving that this is viable and this is possible.
Right.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, because it's
yeah,
like until it is more beneficial to go than to stay, then nobody's going to. And if you can offer these prizes, the original X prize was like a $10,000 prize, and it may have started in the 90s. I think they only really solved it recently in the early.
yeah, because they had a launch back in May, I think it was.
It's possible that he started offering
Sure.
it really early, but the the like 27 teams that decided to compete spent much more than the actual prize ultimately resulted anybody because they had a reason and a target. They had a measurable target to actually achieve, and that was incentive enough for a bunch of science geeks to build planes that could go into space.
Sure.
Um, and
Hmm.
so the original prize was offered in '96, and it was finally claimed in 2004. It was the '90s into the early. Yep. And so he's taken this sort of philosophy and he's generating more and more prizes for easily measurable either medical advancements or educational advancements or clean water or healthy food
Yeah.
or additional space travel stuff that could become commercially viable if people started down that path. So he's encouraging people to go down that path.
think that's what a lot of people forget is so many things that we have right now are due to uh, technology leaps and things that had to happen when we went to space the first time. Yeah.
Or
Hmm.
I would like
Yeah. Yeah, we have Tang. It's the drink the astronauts drank.
I've never had Tang.
It's
I remember it being a fixture in the stores, but I never had it. None of my friends ever had.
tangerine powdered drink.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's better than astronaut ice cream,
I remember getting that.
which I was
Yeah.
always so excited to find at the science centers
Yep.
or whatever wherever. And I would beg and I'd please, oh please, I've got to have the astronaut ice cream. And then I would get it, and every single time I'd be like, oh yeah, this is
Uh,
no, I like it because it's for astronauts, and I would force
yeah.
myself to
Yeah.
eat the entire nasty brick.
Yeah. And just feel that melt, that
That
dissolve.
melt that was
Yeah.
almost gooey by the end of it, but
Yeah.
it still wasn't any
Yeah.
one texture that was recognizable on Earth.
So hopefully, if nothing else, SpaceX can improve upon the ice cream.
Sure. Well, I did realize at some point that it probably wasn't the ice cream that went into space. It was just some product marketed at little space dweebs like me that was like, oh, look, it's got an astronaut on the package. I've actually seen some of the food that they, like on documentaries and stuff, and it looks, I mean, not great because it's, freeze dried and airtight packaging and stuff, but they, much like we were talking about the airlines, do seem to try and make food as palatable while up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and honestly, it's no different than those. If you've ever been to like the dollar store, or not Big Lots, not Hobby Lobby. uh,
Slight difference.
Slight difference. Big Lots, where you have those microwave meals that don't need to be refrigerated, but
Yeah.
it's like beef stew or spaghetti with meatballs, and it's just sitting there out
Yeah.
there on the shelf. Yeah, yeah. But coming back to
The installation.
the installation and what sort of prompted the whole thing. And I've actually got two rabbits I could chase here. I'm gonna do the first one. Tom Sachs, uh, his uh, uh, his artist shop, where they make everything and create everything. He has this thing called the 10 Bullets, which I know sounds very threatening and scary, but it's his 10 bullet points of ways to be successful if you are going to be employed by his shop.
I
buried in
I do like being successful. Were there any ones that jumped out at you specifically?
There were, and it was this like 20-minute, which you can watch on YouTube, or if you, we'll link to Tom Sachs's site, and you can also watch it off of there. But it's like a 20-minute orientation video, and it's all very, what?
I always laugh every time you get a hair in the homework.
I always look at you whenever I'm like, and we're gonna post these links.
The last 2 weeks, I've been very good about getting the links up in
Right.
time.
Good. So you can expect the
For
link to Tom Sachs's site because you need to watch this 20-minute video. And it says very simple things like, be on time,
yeah,
you know, keep your workstation clean. I mean, it uses different terminology,
but
but it's
it boils
essentially
down to
right. But it's essentially how to be successful. And a lot of people, at least I first watched it on the YouTube page, and a lot of people were reacting very negatively to it, like, "Oh, way to take all the fun out of it." And but it was like this is his job.
Yeah.
If he decided to do everything haphazard and just, sit around on a rock and wait for inspiration on something, then nothing would ever get done. But,
There's got to be a process, even to a creative process. There
yeah,
has to be a process.
yeah,
It's like that lovely code of ethics for theater that started circulating a year or
yeah,
two ago from 1946. That was like, never make a show be late because of you.
yeah,
Know your lines. Do the work that you're supposed to do.
yeah. Simple things like that. Yeah. Jeff.
Someone who would actually self-employed, it's unstandard. How do you hold yourself as self-employed individual to the standards that employer would
Hmm.
well, I can do this.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like you are.
You know,
And you've always been very adamant that doing it once successfully is great, but could be luck. You always want to, how do we make sure that this can be reproduced next time so that it comes out just as successful? And setting up systems and setting up parameters.
yeah. My favorite rule or bullet, I should say, in the 10 bullet points is something called knolling. It's called
Sorry?
always be knolling. Knolling.
Okay.
All right. Do you know what it is?
Does each letter stand for something, or is it an abbreviation like
It's a word that was coined. It says, I think, back in the 50s or 60s. It's sort of a slang term.
Okay, then I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. The way it came about. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. No, no, no. I did put the history of it down. Here it is. The term was first used in 1987. Should look at my own notes.
The
uh,
80s, the 50s.
I was
My
alive for
campers
all of
can't
them.
tell them apart, so why should we?
But it was used, it says it was first used in 1987, and the artist Tom Sachs had some relation to where this term was created. But essentially, knolling is the process of arranging like objects in parallel or 90-degree angles as a method of organization. Is the process of arranging like objects in parallel or 90-degree angles as a method of organization.
Oh, like when you're playing like cards and you get a suit or a packet, and you have the four cards and you lay them down like a staircase across the table so that when you add up your score at the end of the
Yes.
game, the cards
Yes.
are stacked and you can count them but then shuffle them back together neatly.
Yes. Yes. It's like that. They said the term came about. The term came about
I got really
because
excited about that.
there was a
So
there.
that helps me understand it.
Okay,
Cool.
good.
It was the term came about because there was a janitor at Frank Gary's furniture fabrication shop, and at the time they were known for making Florence Knowles angular furniture. I had to look it up, but
Okay.
it's very sharp, hard, rigid edges. And this janitor apparently would arrange any tools he found lying around on the workbenches and workstation, and he would put them in parallel or at right angles, mirroring the furniture they were making in the shop. And so the term just kind of became to be called knolling.
Knolling.
Knolling. And so Sachs, as part of his 10 bullet points, has the phrase always be knolling, which is essentially find a place for something, put it in order that you can
Oh, I need that
recognize.
rule in my
Right.
everyday life.
It's really funny because I used to do this when I was a kid. I didn't know what the term was. I guess actually it would have been around 1986 or 87. But I used to do this, that I would always arrange objects that I saw on a table in straight lines, or at least put them in a right, you know, intersecting perpendicular.
Interesting. I sort of I
Yeah,
I I like Tetris things together. So
sure.
like I'll try and take up as little tabletop surface as possible and have, like the screwdriver sitting inside the claw of the hammer so that it lays right up against the
Yeah.
handle, but it's like tucked in and taking up as little extra surface as possible.
Yeah. So always be knolling. That's what I took away from the 10 bullet points.
So what was the other rabbit path you
The
could
other rabbit hole was when I started to put this article about the installation in connection with this Mars Pioneer program that they want to do, it started me thinking on, okay, let's say they do get a colony established in 2023. That's kind of the goal. And I think it's like every 2 years they send more people there and, it will slowly grow. But it now becomes its own culture. You know what I mean? Like because they're pulling from our world and our culture. However, it's going to come up with its
but a
own
subset.
right.
In fact, a subset of like-minded individuals with certain people in a certain way are going to want to hop on and go out in space.
Right.
And
So there, yeah. So it just the romantic in me started thinking about what stories will they create, what sort of customs will they create that'll probably bear out of probably routines that they have to do to I don't know clean the oxygen filters or whatever.
right,
Yeah,
and how they can practice
yeah, yeah. Of the first landing or the first harvest, the first time they were able to I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? But that's where my mind started to go and like what that would be and
So, how long did you consider filling out an application while reading this?
oh, because yeah, Jeff and I have been having this conversation a lot the last 2 weeks that my brain
off-world.
and just make a fresh break, find a planet to call my own. Yeah, but yeah, when I first
40.
read this article about a month ago, yeah, I spent a good 2 days just kind of thinking, do I have what it takes to go one way to a planet, live with essentially, I think it's the first group will only be of 4 people. So you're
Okay.
with these 3 other people for 2 years before the next group of people come. They come in 2 year rotations. Huh?
Okay.
If they come. Yeah, there's the other thing. What if you're successful and set up and then they go,
We're bored.
yeah, there's an interesting, yeah.
Oh my. And now you're stranded in space
Now, yeah,
with contractual obligation to have baby free shenanigans for the first 2 years.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I play the what if game a lot when I
Yeah.
find these big, kind of weird, almost unfathomable questions. Like,
Could I move to Mars?
could I move to Mars? Do I psychologically do I have what it takes to move to Mars?
I can answer that question for myself very simply. I do not.
Yeah,
I could not make that leap.
and most people that I presented it to very clearly said no.
Yeah.
Like I have not asked this question to one person where somebody has given it as much thought as I think I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. A phone
Oh,
call?
I heard a little bit about this, but go on.
Okay, there's this thing called Parkinson's voice. nobody questions us at that point. I feel like
Oh, oh.
but it was,
It's interesting. And I know I've talked about this maybe to you, Aaron. This was months and months ago. There was a piece I heard on NPR, and it was these two doctors, and it was a very young doctor, someone my age or maybe even younger, and then a much older doctor who I think has since retired. But they were both having this discussion because there was this woman that had created an algorithm. That by using MRI scans reasonably could predict and diagnose depression, and beginning to start to look at other um, um, uh, ailments of the brain, uh, things like that. And so there was this discussion between the two of them because apparently this woman, sorry, let me go back a second. She, since MRIs were first being used, she has been collecting data of, of scans of people's brains that have depression, and so she feeds that into a machine. And they said this particular program, when it looks at a brain scan, I think it's something like up to 85% reasonably can diagnose depression, and as well as start to give some hints as to what is causing that depression, like what area of the brain is misfiring
Oh, was
or
is it chemical,
right.
situational,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah. And so it prompted this discussion between the two of them of would you want to know? Would you want to know? Would you want to treat
if
it?
if you were asymptomatic, if it wasn't affecting you, would you want to know
Yes.
that the underlying root was there?
Or that was part of the conversation, or part of it was also going back to, they say how, a lot of great artists have,
Hmm.
suffered from um, struggled with depression on some level. They point to um, Mark Twain and Edgar Allan Poe, and a lot of great artists that sometimes had these like manic phases and depressive phases, or just sort of had a general malaise, and that's part of what made them who they are. And so if you had that, would you want to treat it? Like basically they were getting in this discussion of where does the chemical you end and the, I don't know, the soul you, or the,
Are you not a portion made up by your neuroses, your
yes.
issues?
It,
Or more so, if you are unstable, doesn't that make you who you are?
yes.
And if you are unstable and that is making you who you are, and then you have the ability to take away that unstableness, do you then change fundamentally as to who you are?
Yeah.
Sure.
It was really interesting. The one thing, and this was a conversation months ago. But I remember the very interesting thing about their discussion is I would have thought going into, before I heard these two doctors even speak to each other, I would have thought that the younger guy would have been all gung ho about, yes, let's go in there. If I can sit in a machine for 5 minutes and it can reasonably diagnose me, do it. Let's treat it. And I assume the older doctor would be less about that, and
Yeah.
defend it more from the idea of this is part of what makes me who I am. But it was completely reversed. It was completely opposite going into what I knew the conversation was going to be about, and their positions were completely opposite.
Perhaps. It reminds me to take that extrapolation further, the voice diagnosis, the brain scan diagnosis. One of the X prizes that's currently up for grabs is effectively a functional tricorder. Um, being able to diagnose being able to diagnose somebody with a handheld scannable sort of system where you just walk up to a patient not knowing anything and being able to get all the stats and an active diagnosis sort of in one scan system. That's one of the medical prizes up for grabs.
Cool. And they seem to say, well, maybe not a handheld device, but they say a lot of those the MRIs and things like that are capable of it. It's just not
It's figuring out how to read them.
right.
Mm,
Or and making it on a smaller scale and reasonably cost effective. Maybe that's
that's
more
true
of it.
because you
Yeah.
got to be able to throw one in the first aid kit.
Yeah.
Don't remember that conversation.
Talking about
Soften the
is
edges
it
and
it's probably the difference because uh, I went I went into a lot of MRIs when I was a kid. I struggled with depression, and so um, they were trying to see if it was chemical, how much of it was situational, and so I remember going into an MRI several times, and it's this giant tube that goes into a wall, at least the first ones that I went into. And you have to lie perfectly still. They don't want you to breathe deep. They don't want you to move too much. And yeah, it was. I won't say it was a terrifying, traumatic experience for me, but it's one that I remember because I mean it was. But I've heard of some kids like they're put in there and they have full out panic attacks. Some situations where they would have when they put the child in there, they have a nurse or a parent put their hand on the child's leg so that there's some
continued contact
yes,
even through the process.
yeah. And so I remember those experiences as being weird,
Intimidating at the very
intimidating, but
least.
maybe not traumatic. However, towards the end, because I had these MRIs and cat and pet scans over the years, I remember being in one of the first open MRIs, which essentially by that time, and this may be what you're talking about, where instead of going into a closed tube that in some ways was just big enough for your body really to fit in
Right.
this hole in the wall.
Looked like a pizza oven.
Yes, oh, that's a really good metaphor for that. I'm really
It
glad.
really did. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like loading the torpedo bay in Star Trek. Like yeah, like the
Yes.
sunglass case into the tube,
And that movie came out about the time that I was going into this thing.
which
So
could
don't think that wasn't going through my head. I heard the bag
they're gonna launch me into space.
I heard the bagpipes playing, but I knew I would respawn on the Genesis planet. Yes, the open MRI is more of a ring. Okay, it was a ring out in the center of a large room,
Yeah.
and so you were never in a enclosed space
Only the part of you that was scanning was directly inside the ring.
inside that. But the ring was like probably like a 6 foot diameter.
So it was even further away from your body
Yes.
as well as narrower,
Yes.
covering less
And
of you.
so yeah, your head would pass in the field of this big circle, and it would get the same type of scan. If I remember when they first came out, there was something about the open MRIs being a less not clear, but maybe not accurate. But the picture they said if there was a maybe that's it. Yeah, yeah. If there was a choice, put them in the enclosed MRI. But of course, that's over 20 years ago now. So I don't know if there's any difference. I don't even know if they have the where they put you in the pizza oven type MRIs anymore. I don't know. We'll get our
research team on
research
that.
team on that right now.
No idea. But it makes sense. I mean, a lot of pediatric medication is getting cooperation out of a young patient who can't necessarily voice as many things to you as specifically and as or take directions as specifically. So a lot of pediatric medication behavioral treatment is, okay, it's going to pinch, but it's going to go be real quick, and then you're not going to get sick for a whole year, and you'll have your flu shot, or whatever. Just yeah, or I I remember optometry appointments in pediatric medication, would be like a video game. It'd be like, okay, if you see the light on this side, click it with this hand. And if you see the light on this side, you click it with this hand to try and make it a game and a process and a procedure. Yes, because anytime they can administer shots while the child is distracted, it's an all win situation. It's freaky. I still would rather turn and look the other direction while I'm getting a immunization shot or whatever, my blood drawn. I don't want to see my blood literally leaving my body that
What
way.
if you're that creeper that like if it's something there and you're like, look away or look the needle?
Ugh. Yeah, very. I could not look at the needle whenever they drew blood.
Yeah.
That's just, I would always get kind of dizzy, woozy, fainty. That was just me. I had no problem with the sensation,
Yeah.
but if I was looking at it, that was a
It's
whole
just a
different.
weird thing.
Yeah. This is my blood. I worked hard at producing this.
I got over a lot of my needle fears when I was in a medical research study, and so I was getting an injection or my blood drawn every week for like 3 months. I was, but I can't talk about it. Oh, I just did. Oh no.
They release a
Ah.
biological agent in you.
Here we go. I was looking up some MRI, like closed as opposed to open, and they do say the closed MRIs produces a clearer image. And so if they say generally they only use the open MRIs for people with that are too big to fit in the tube, or people that are particularly claustrophobic, usually children. They say.
Interesting.
So, okay, so there you go.
So I brought a slightly themed article. We've just had the 4th of July, which has all of the fireworks displays all over the country. But they were great. They were amazing, I assume. And of course, since we are an international podcast, I do conditionalize this statement that this is particularly American themed article.
Canada Day.
Canada Day just
Yay,
happened.
Canada.
Anyway, so I found an article about the science of pyrotechnics and the pyrotechnic displays. Now, I've always been sort of fascinated by the actual firecrackers, like how they make the fireworks themselves. And those are still basically made by hand, one at a time, by pyrotechnic artists. And the way they pack the chemicals and which chemicals they pack determines the shape and the arrangement of the firework, and then the kinds of chemicals or what colors it burns. And it's all very low tech in its way, but absolutely still an artistic craftsmanship sort of process. But what this article specifically was about, and more stuff I didn't know about, is some of the high tech show creation elements. Shows have been the big shows, like that have to be the same every night and choreographed to music, like at Disney World, or have been computerized for a. Yeah, it's true. One of my side note, there's a brownie faced firework in the Disney show. Like it bursts and it's a circle with 2 dots and a frowny face line right as the villains appear during the fireworks show. And that one has always impressed me because I get the physics that you could pack it in such a way that it would burst just like that, but it amazes me. That's just a chemical burn. Yeah. They have the big
Math.
and math.
That's what we're
My
avoiding. Yeah. Solve your own problems, math.
Like so many people are impressed by Phantasmic at the Disney parks, which is their sort of it's the Hollywood Studios show, which is like these big sprays of water with projections of the movies on the water. And I'm like, I know how you do that. You spray the water, you project light at it. Done. But the fireworks shows are what impress me so much. And so they've been computerized for a couple of decades now, starting with a really rudimentary system to a more advanced one. I guess so. Um, but because if you want the firework to explode on the downbeat of the music, then it's got to launch 3.2 seconds before that moment, and so the computer does all that calculation. It knows how long the firecracker takes to burst, and so you can basically program the launch codes into the computer. Um, and so they were talking a little bit about that system. I didn't know it's been around as long as it has been. And they say a lot of the shows, small town local fireworks shows aren't choreographed that sort of way. Um, it's when you're really trying to synchronize to music or other events like, you know, uh, rock concerts and theme park shows or concerts that have or sporting events that like as soon as this happens the fireworks are going to go off, blah 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 blah. But the other interesting piece of fireworks software I didn't know existed is this virtual fireworks choreography software where you program in the firework and then it explodes in a real-time virtual simulation. So you can load a virtual fireworks show to a piece of music, show it to your client, and say, this is what your show is going to look like. And because the firecrackers are packed so specifically and there's so much, because you know exactly how long a firecracker takes to go up, how long it burns, how long it bursts, that you can equate those to a computer program. And so you can organize, and then the client is like, wow, that's great, but I'd really wish there were more blue firecrackers during this section. Rather than like having to burst another whole set of fireworks, you redo it in this virtual software. And you can do different vantage points. So, like, if you're doing a show that everybody's watching from one side, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing a show that's like in the middle of a theme park and they can watch it from any side, the choreography has to work from all directions. Um, and it just, it's sort of obvious now that I know it exists, but it wasn't something I'd ever really thought about of how to choreograph those shows.
Yeah. What blows me away is that wasn't intentional. Is the fact that while that technology exists, that there were people that were doing it and thinking about it before that technology existed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's true. They talk about, before there were boards at all, let alone computerized boards, you would basically have a road flare and you would have a bunch of firework technicians running around lighting each of the work with this road flare and then going to grab a new one. And it was, they were going to launch these 10 and then we're going to launch these 10 and then we're going to sort of launch these 30 as the finale or whatever. But yeah, then they started choreographing the shows before there were computer simulations, before there were computer boards. They were already sort of thinking in those 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional terms.
Yeah.
Because time is also a major factor in this. But the last like third of the article is the old crusties going, it doesn't matter what software you have. If you don't have the sense of it, you can have all the tech in the world and still put up a lousy show.
Yeah.
And so
Well, I guess that would be part of it. I wonder if the software for whether there is still be comparable.
your actual creation of
Sure.
Well, my guess is that most fireworks are pretty reliable these days. The point where that's probably true. But if you're not at the Disney level, you don't have the If a reliable firecracker is expensive, then you're probably not doing a really tightly choreographed show anyway.
I remember, I think this was on Mr. Rogers. I feel it was one of those like kids' educational shows that I used to watch a lot,
Yeah,
and where it was a guy and showing him like packing the actual fireworks and measuring everything out very carefully and Lady Fairchild doing it. Yeah, sorry. Now I'm imagining what was the cat's name? I love
Daniel
you, meow
Striped
meow.
Tiger. No,
No, the
the
one
other
that
one.
lived in the tree with the owl. I love you, meow meow,
Yeah,
or whatever.
Henrietta.
Yes, I think that is true.
Go on.
But anyway, but I just remember, and I've seen a couple of different things of these businesses that put together the fireworks, and a lot of them are like generational.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you learn to do it, then you teach your children, and they pick it up, and their children, and it just keeps being passed down. And so a lot of the firework making businesses that are out there, the same ones that have been around for
Forever.
50, 75 years or more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's sort of what appealed to me about this is the combination of the high and the low tech. And I find fireworks shows ridiculously exciting and beautiful. I mean, you look at them one way and it's like there's some stuff exploding up there, which is exciting. But on the other hand, it's like all of this nitpicky decisions and exacting standards to make them safe and attractive and really exciting.
Yeah. Rockets in. I can't sing with you because of the delay.
Yeah, but they can only hear you talk, so it's
Lunch.
probably okay.
Yeah.
So, anybody got any upcoming projects?
Mm,
Oh, it's going to be a good week then.
I don't, because you've got this week off. You said.
Yeah, no camp, no Bat Hamlet.
Yeah, and I'm again still kind of floating a little bit. Yeah. So so Jeff is making up for all of our slacking this week.
I do not feel guilty about taking a vacation. Yep, so we'll see you on the 15th. You, the listeners.
We won't see them.
I guess so.
It's time for sign offs. Yep.
No.
Was that your sign off? Okay.
I'm Aaron, and I feel like a firework.
Maybe you are a firework.
That's what I was trying to go for, but
Well done.
I'm not very hip.
My name is Adam, and I'm going to strap my MRI to my firework and ride it all the way to Mars.
Oh, well, we've got to mark this one again. All right.
What?
We've got to mark this episode.
Mark it how?
Explicit, not safe for work.
All I said was MRI and firework.
That's
I'm going to
the
ride
joke.
it. Oh.
Well, the comedy.
That doesn't work on the radio, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Da 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 da.